The following episode contains explicit content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
What I noticed was the more people I told, the easier it got to tell the story, and almost more power that I felt over my prior addiction.
That in the middle of my pain, God was right there, and He was loving me by loving Mike, and He was bringing Mike what he needed, which made me feel safe.
I was made to walk in the valley. I was built to stand in the storm. There's a peace deep inside me that cannot last any war. I have faced the dark and the danger. It can't scare me anymore. 'Cause I was made to walk in the valley. I was built to stand in the storm.
This is the Nook podcast. My name is Stephen, and this is the conclusion of the series on the perils of pornography and its effect on a marriage. In the previous episodes, we've heard all about the vulnerability of the confession from Mike, and we heard about the devastation that the truth had on Erin after believing that Mike never struggled with this issue. And then we took a deep dive into what is going on in the mind and heart of someone dealing with unhealthy sexual behavior with Nick Stumbo from Pure Desire. So far, I'd like to think that this story has been covered from the proper number of angles, -1. And the last piece is a discussion with Mike and Erin together, talking about what God has done in and through them since things blew up in 2020. Scheduling the time and place for this one had its normal challenges, but eventually it just worked best for me to meet Mike and Erin in their home. And while it's difficult to properly paint a picture of the three of us sitting at their kitchen table for an audio podcast, there was something so meaningful about sitting 6 feet from the spot where Mike finally admitted to his long-standing dependence on pornography. Seeing these people who mean so much to me sitting next to each other, smiling, laughing, and crying through this discussion was so beautiful that as I sit here recording this, I so badly wish that I had taken just one picture. Alas, this recording will have to do. This is Dirty Little Secret Part 4, The Healing.
First of all, I was just curious. I've had you both in a solo situation. What did you walk away with from those conversations? What was your feeling about having told that story? Either one of you can jump in.
You go first. I'm very curious.
I walked away with realizing that my facts were inaccurate, apparently.
Yeah, but did you know that day or did you find out later?
I had no idea. We did the interview and I thought, oh my gosh, this is great. Everything came out fluid and it sounded good and this is great. It's a great story. And I get home and she's like, okay, so how was it? And I started to talk about what happened and what I said. And she's like, no, that's not what happened at all. And I said, what do you mean it didn't happen? And she's like, that your details are off.
Every wife in the whole world will understand this situation.
So then I kind of felt deflated and I thought, well, this whole thing is going to fail now because I apparently lied because you know it on the podcast.
Oh, I'm so sorry I made you feel that way.
The fact checkers will get back as soon as it all releases.
The facts were not that important, the ones that you got wrong. So
yeah. The
it's
drama is still there.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the most important.
The most important part of the story is true.
Well, that's
where you sat's a little bit iffy, but
so that was my takeaway.
Okay. Erin's turn.
I felt very tired, just to be honest, after it's a lot to relive those couple years. And so it's just draining. And when I talk about it, I have to remember like we have, I hate to say we made it to the other side because, you've been married forever. You're never over the hump. It just, that marriage is for the long game. But to not go back to that place of anger because I was reliving all of it, I have to make a conscious effort to remember that is something we've moved past and we are in a good place now. So I can't can't go back to those emotions. And it's just interesting to me how easy that can happen.
Yeah.
So,
are you tired of the story? Are you tired of having to tell it?
No. And that's an interesting aspect too. It's just really a roller coaster of emotions, because I would love nothing more than to just keep telling it because of what we've seen God do.
Yeah.
So the painful parts of it are awful, but the redemption in it is like, it makes me emotional every time I talk about it, because we tangibly saw the grace of God, and we saw him do a miracle. And until you go through something really hard, then you don't know what that feels like.
Yeah.
But because of the pain and the frustrations on your part and whatever else, we know what God's grace is. So that part doesn't get old telling.
Gotcha. You are nearing the 3-year mark. Does it feel like it was just yesterday, or do you feel every bit of the 3 years?
Great question. It kind of feels both, honestly, in a weird way. It feels like it just happened yesterday, in the fact that it's still so fresh, it seems like, even after almost 3 years.
Sure.
And my temptation is still there every day. That hasn't waned over time like I thought it was going to. But at the same time, the struggle for that first year especially was so much and so real day after day that it seems like it was an extended period of time, if that makes sense. So it kind of feels both.
Well, I'm glad you said it the way you did, because if we can go back to just 2020, it felt like it took 3 years to get through 2020.
Yes.
Every day
For
was
everybody.
a week. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then you throw in what you guys were dealing with. Erin shared in our discussion how, as if things weren't bad enough between the two of you, then you throw in that you can't leave the house. That had to feel like an imprisonment in a year that just simply wouldn't end all by itself.
Like kind of hysterical when you think about it out loud. Like absolutely ridiculous that not only do I actually hate you, now I can't get away from you.
And on top of that, so I confessed on August 10th of 2020. 2 months later, in October, I actually got COVID.
Right.
And at that time, there was still the whole quarantine thing, being at home for 10 days straight. I was up in our master bedroom. I couldn't leave. So she had to bring me meals. She had to bring me fresh water. And this was in the midst of the fire of hatred that she had inside of her, that God made her like take care of me for 10 days.
I could have really poisoned his food. I mean, I held the power for those 10 days.
Yeah, that part of it is pretty scary.
It is. It is. At least I should have spit in there or something.
Move just 1 inch the wrong way and this will cut you.
I dare you. Breathe wrong and you're out.
Let's just call it a 3-year period since it all blew up. Every bit of work that went on since then. Were you always okay with the prospect of being able to tell this story, or did that was there a certain point where you thought, okay, maybe we could tell this someday?
From my perspective, yeah, sure, let's talk about it. I knew up front it wasn't something to share. I mean, we were too deep in the hurt and the anger
and the shame.
And the shame, yeah.
The guilt that I felt. Yeah.
Yeah. That it would have been sharing from an unhealthy place, and we were too raw. If I had shared with too many people, I think I would have been easily swayed in how I responded to him. So it was really interesting. I knew that it was something I needed to protect. And it was one of the strangest parts of the whole thing was, as much as I hated him, I was also really protective of him.
Yeah.
And which made me mad, but I saw how much he was trying, and I saw how broken he was. And in my anger, I was still really proud of him. And so I didn't want him to be hurt by other people's opinions of him. And I knew he was embarrassed. And so That friend, I wasn't ready to share it either, except with a close group of friends that I needed support with.
Yeah.
But
When you shared that you told your folks,
we did.
was that right away?
No,
No.
we waited a while, and we told them because I had to. We had gone home for Thanksgiving that year of 2020. And I was I think my rage was at an all-time high. And so it was very apparent that there was something going on. And
You're barely 3 months?
yeah,
You're still in the blast zone.
it was dark. And when you're with your family, I couldn't hide those emotions. You get kind of good at hiding it in front of other people. Yeah, the clothes are good. Everybody's happy.
Well,
But
that's what us Christians are so good at.
We're so
is
good at.
pasting the smile on.
absolutely.
And everything's great.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus. Love you, Lord. So good to see you at church. But at home, I just couldn't. And so my mom and I were talking, and she, as moms do, probe in a really healthy way. And I didn't want to break Mike's trust, but I so badly wanted her to ask me, is this what it is? And she would, when we were there, she asked questions, careful to be respectful. But she asked me specifically, is it pornography? And I just broke because I needed my mom. I need my mom. And I needed her to not hate Mike, which I'm really so proud of how my parents handled it. Because I needed them to still love him because he was the same guy they fell in love with too. But I needed my mom to hold my hand because I've never hurt like this before.
Yeah.
So telling them was really important. But after that, we waited a while to talk about it. Well, honestly, till Mike was ready.
Was it rough for you being in that circle, that close to everything, having blown up?
I didn't even know that she told her parents. They never treated me any different. It wasn't until quite a while later that I found out that she had told them. And obviously they were very angry with me, as they should be, and because I'd hurt their daughter.
Yeah.
And, but to their credit, they never treated me any different. We waited quite a while to tell my parents, to even reach out to some friends, because it's like, how do I say this and not lose friends? How do I say this and keep friends?
Yeah.
And so it was a hard time. And eventually I started to tell close people around me, different groups of guys that I knew would be in my corner and check up on me and help pray with me. And then what I've noticed was the more people I told, the easier it got to tell the story, and almost more power that I felt over my prior addiction. That it was getting out there to more people that I knew were surrounding me and covering me. And then it just made me more free to start telling more people, to the point of here we are today, telling the story.
One specific example I remember of when Mike, I think it was the first time you shared with anybody. And it was a really important moment for my healing. Probably a year in, you remember this part more than I do. You, sir, actually, Mr. Murphy, had texted Mike and a group of guys. You guys had all started supporting each other. And so Mike had told me about that. And I think that day, I can't remember if I told you or if it was just me and God talking about this. I needed to know he was surrounding himself with men who were asking him hard questions. And I don't want to know all the things that you all deal with. I just want to know that you were talking to somebody. And so I was just kind of struggling that day. And so you texted him that day with this group of guys, and Mike told you all everything.
Yeah.
And it made me feel, so in love with Mike, because it reminded me, this is a man of character. This is the reason I chose him. That is an extremely vulnerable experience to tell these guys that you respect and love so much that, hey, I'm really struggling. And then it showed me that in the middle of my pain, God was right there. And he was loving me by loving Mike.
Yeah.
And he was bringing Mike what he needed, which made me feel safe. So that was one of the first things that was a really big step, I think, in our healing too, was when you told them.
There's a really interesting aspect to that when you understand, when you even have the slightest understanding to the isolation, the hiding that you talked about with me, Mike, and that constantly guarding and the paranoia, everything that goes with it. And yet in the telling, you just said, in the telling, the more people you told, the more people you invited into that circle, the more free you felt, which goes completely counter to the idea of, I can't tell anybody about this.
Right.
What a huge, and I realize that just the three of us sitting here talking about it is not just going to snap somebody into shape to want to, all right, today's the day.
Right.
But I guess I'd like to think that you expressing, the both of you expressing how those trusted circles, those men that you do respect are now in your corner. And I hope you felt that we were fighting for you.
Yeah.
In a time like that.
It's so fascinating because when I was in the midst of that addiction, that pornography addiction, there was so much isolation. And it felt like the deception is so real, I can't tell anybody this. And so to go from that to where we are today, it was for sure a process.
Yeah.
To, first of all, after I told Erin, I told my pastor. That's one thing we decided. I was going to meet with him. And I love and respect that man greatly. I've known him for years. And to have to sit there in front of him and tell him that was very hard. Mm-hmm. But I was met with love and respect through that.
Yeah.
And then starting to tell you guys. And so that empowerment just kind of kept growing. And it's like, okay, well, I'm telling these people. And then in the process, these people are also telling me, Mike, this is kind of normal with a lot of guys. Like it's okay for you to admit this. And now we're going to help walk you out of this.
Yeah.
So that was a great thing to be surrounded by people. And so also I think as men, it's almost like we are told, just shut your mouth and bear it.
Yep.
Right. Just bury it.
Rub some dirt on it.
Deep. Right. You've got to tough this out. Right. You can keep this hidden. You can figure a way out of it yourself. You don't have to get anybody else involved.
Yep.
But that's such a lie. And I also always thought too, well, women are the ones who share their feelings, right? They're the ones who kind of open up and have their little chat groups.
Which we do quite well.
Yes.
But that's not.
And plenty of.
We do. That's why we're so healthy.
But in our society, that's not a manly thing to do, right? Get with your bros and just start talking about your problems. That's not what we, but yet that's what we need to be doing. That's where the freedom can begin. And you can start helping each other walk through stuff instead of being isolated and alone, and allow that addiction to control you and potentially overtake you one day.
As we were scheduling this, and it's just amazing to me that, three people that you just need to sit down at a table and set up some microphones, and yet there's just logistics to it. When it was decided that I would come over here and we would sit in your kitchen and do this, it literally just felt perfect to me. We are sitting here at this table 6-8 feet from ground zero where this confession took place.
That is a fact we do both agree on.
Good to know.
Yes.
Was everything a trigger for you early on? Immediately did this spot over here to my right just go, oh my gosh, that will always be there's always kind of there's a mark right there because of what happened.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There are certain things that do put me right back to that time. And it's not like every time I come into my kitchen, I think, here's where I found out about the porn.
Yeah.
So it wasn't anything like that, but they're just, especially if I'm upset, maybe about something else, that will always be a place that I will not forget. And again, I don't carry it with me daily, but it was my life changed staying at the island. And there are certain things I can't recall all of them, but there are certain things that will just put me back to that time.
Yeah.
Even things that conversations we'll have now, or if Mike says something that I don't like or makes me feel emotion of some sort, it will put me back to that place. And so I've learned to say, hey, this is really reminding me of what we used to be like. We need to talk. And
Yeah.
but yeah, there's some triggering events or triggering things.
You told me, Mike, that, well, I remember asking you the question, do you ever fear a relapse? Your answer surprised me a little bit.
What'd you say?
Do you recall?
I probably said every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's the truth. That's the
Yeah, there was no hesitation in you saying that. Do you feel like you're able to call for help in a situation like that? If you feel some kind of spiraling or somebody grab my arm, I'm going over the edge here.
Yeah, I do feel that because of the people that I've been able to surround myself with. But it's also very shocking and surprising to me that it still feels that way 3 years down the road. Because I thought, and maybe this is my own, being naive, is that as time goes on, the temptation will decrease and eventually be gone one day.
Yeah.
That just hasn't been the case for me. And I don't know if it is for some. But yeah, it truly does feel like anything could happen that would trigger me back into doing that every day.
Yeah.
It's a battle. It's a struggle.
But do you feel like you can even reach out to Erin in a moment like that and just go, I don't know what the deal is today, but
I do feel that way with Erin, with you, with a group of guys that are surrounded not only in the core group we have, but also a couple guys that I go to church with. I meet on a regular basis. And yeah, and sometimes they'll ask me, hey, you still clean? Yeah, still clean.
Hope they do. Hope they ask you all the time.
Yeah.
how do you feel in a moment like that when you know you don't have to hesitate or put on the lie?
It's such a great feeling because I went so long, decades of time in this isolation period of I can't talk to anybody about it. So now to be able to talk to people about it, it's an incredible feeling to have that, just to know that whether I have to reach out to them every day or every week or whatever it is, to know that they're there, that they're supporting me, that there won't be judgment, that there won't be, what's wrong with you? Why can't you get over this? You know, it's just, you got this, you know, you can do this, carry on. And we're going to be here by your side as you go.
Sure. Does that hit you, Erin, in any sort of way that...
Yes, it does.
Okay, then I'll just leave it there. How does...
I'm sorry, you can finish your question.
No. I just, it probably is it's better to go a much more direct route. And just how does that hit you to know that he understands that he's one click of a mouse away from a mistake?
I mean, just honestly, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because I too would like to think that, you know, we've done all this work, so I think that we're good. And Mike, that is a thing of the past. And that would make me feel so much better. I appreciate the honesty. Because otherwise you would just be lying to make me feel better. So I'm greatly appreciative of the honesty. Because I mean, that was the part that was the hardest for me in all of this, was the lying. I understand. I understand what men struggle with. I mean, I don't know what that's like, but I know I can understand I get that. The lying was just too much for me. So I appreciate the honesty. But it's also really terrifying, and I can't do that again.
Oh, sure.
So I don't want to say that if it ever happened again, then I don't want to make statements like that.
Yeah.
But I just can't even imagine walking through that again. So that's scary. Mm-hmm. At the same time, though, and I think I shared this with you before, like I will not be Mike's babysitter or mom. And so part of it is me just having to trust him and trust that he's making good decisions to connect with God and to surround himself with people that he can be honest with. And so a lot of it on my end is just letting go of control because I don't have any. And so it's a big trust play on my part to trust him and then to trust God ultimately with my future. I cannot place my trust in my marriage with Mike. I can trust Mike and I can believe the best for you and be there to support you, but I can't place my trust in you. You're a human. It can only be in God and trust that he's got me.
Yeah.
So scary.
Is this is a deeply philosophical question. That's a heads up. Is trust an on-off switch, or is it a gauge? Like some days you feel like you've got 80%, or something happens and it drops back to 30. And is it wavering, or is it I trust you or I don't?
For me, it's wavering.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's the case for everybody, but from my own experience, it can adjust. I can kind of trust you today. I mostly want a lot to trust you. I lots of trust you. But part of me might be hesitant depending on what that day was like.
So, Mike, what does it mean to you to keep building on that trust?
It means so much to me to keep that meter high on the trust level. I come from a divorced home. My parents got divorced when I was 1.
Wow.
And I just grew up. It was normal life to go to my dad's every other weekend and then back to my house, see him on Wednesday nights sometimes, and not have that mom and dad structure in the home. Both my parents remarried, but it still wasn't my mom and my real dad together. So, and that was hard because my dad missed out on a lot of stuff when sports and activities and whatnot. So I don't want to even do anything that would lend to foster an environment like that to our children. It's very important to me that we do stay together, and whatever I need to do to make that happen, we're going to do our best to make that happen.
Yeah.
To keep this family whole, to keep our kids growing up with their mother and father in the same household. It's very important to me.
I was going to say, you mentioned that 2 or 3 times to me. So, and with all of my psychological background,
You seem to have some. You're really good at it.
That's really quite a statement all by itself, that this unit is so important to you, because not only have you seen the damage, but I guess I'd like to think that you've seen the potential for it right here. Is there a way for you to gauge what kind of a motivator that is for you?
That's a hard one to gauge and put into words. And it goes beyond just providing a whole and stable home for the kids. It's breaking this cycle of pornography addiction in the Cluely name.
Yeah.
Because I know that at least my grandfather and my dad struggled with it. I don't know how far back it goes, but I know it's been multiple generations at least. And it bled into mine. Yeah. So it needs to end here. And that's the other part of this, is breaking this cycle to where, I'm not naive to think that Caden won't ever be exposed to it or maybe even get into it at some point, but to know that he can come and talk to me and know that I can be real with him and say, yeah, I struggle with it too. And not let it be something where it's just on him that he's got to figure this out, or what's wrong with you, and not know that dad had a problem too, So it's a multi-pronged approach to this, that we need to keep a stable home for them. It's important to me. And then also breaking the cycle of addiction that's been in our family for multiple generations.
Right. Well, you both have talked about your willingness to share this story. I'll thank you again. How do you feel people view the two of you, whether separately or together, with this is, because this is a known, at least in certain circles, that this is just a known thing now. I just asked you about whether it's an on or off switch for trust. Is it a shame or acceptance in one switch, or are there varying degrees of how you feel people view you, or is it victory versus shame? I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we could kind of peel that apart, but
that one was hard for me at first because I cared so much about what people may think or what they may talk about when they get with their group of friends.
Yeah.
Oh, did you hear Mike did this? And oh my, Erin's talking about this on the back end. And so I was very concerned about that, honestly. And I'm sure people talk, right? I mean, that's just what people do.
Yeah.
And I can't help that and I can't control that. And I've gotten to the point now where I don't even worry about it anymore. Let people say and believe what they will. This is just what Erin and I have been called to do by God, is to, and God gets good out of everything, right? So this is a terrible situation that almost tore us apart. And yet he's getting good out of it by us being able to have healed from it and to be able to share our story now. So regardless of what people may say or think, we just need to keep telling our story in hopes that people will be able to relate to our story and be able to find freedom and love again in their marriage the way that we have.
yeah.
Did you hear what he said? That we'll keep telling our story?
Yes.
That's good. You got it on tape.
That's what you were
Yeah,
verifying
I just
there.
want to make sure Mike heard it too.
That's what she keeps telling me. She's like, we got to go, we got to tell these people.
Erin's going to make you hit a seminar circuit here.
That is her gifting and her expertise is to get in front of a
Just so proud
microphone
of
and
you.
talk. It's not mine.
Even with that, Erin, I'm very curious because you said that even in some of the worst of this, you still had your times of feeling very protective.
Yeah.
You're very open about the story, but do you ever feel like you still have to protect him? Or is this agreement between the two of you of wanting to tell the story, wanting to give God the praise for what you've both arrived from? Or was there ever any hesitance? It's like, well, I don't know if we should tell the story because, like you said with your mom, I don't want your parent, I don't want my parents to hate Mike.
Right.
Is there a vacillation in that at all?
Not now. No. And honestly, I knew very clearly early on, the Holy Spirit, you wait until Mike is ready. This is not to tell until Mike is ready.
That's good.
Which was hard because I was ready. And I would say things like, Mike, is it time now? Like, people need to know that Jesus can help them. No, Erin, it's not time. I don't think I ever want to talk about this. And so I knew different. I knew that this would be something that could be so helpful to people.
Yeah.
But it just was so clear in my heart. You wait until Mike is ready. Because otherwise, then it's just me doing it my own strength.
Right.
And I'm so sorry.
I'm going to need to sign a release for the dog. Now that his voice is
Quite apparent. I knew I needed to wait on Mike's readiness to share, because he and I need to, if I have learned anything else at any of this process, Mike and I have to be on the same page with things.
Oh, sure.
And so in order to share something this big, he and I have to be together in it and in agreement. And so we don't share unless we both are on the same page.
This is a really good crystal ball question.
Great.
Do you feel like there will be some point in your life that this will just be a distant memory, just a blip that happened back then, and it's been so long, gosh, I hadn't even thought about that for a while? Or will there always be a little bit more of this that you're constantly going to take with you?
From my perspective, it's just really interesting to see how this thing in our lives is a topic that has always been something that's on my heart. Not the pornography aspect of it, but what it does to a female. And so, I mean, ever since I was in like middle school, the idea of getting to encourage women of who they are in Christ and their value, and like our value and our worth doesn't come from what anybody says about us or the way that we look, where we are solely rooted in Christ, in that what he thinks of me matters more than any person. So that's something that's always been really important to me. And that's just always been a passion of mine. So I didn't realize when I got married that I would so heavily need to fall back on all those things I learned. And like my favorite song in high school was, I don't know if you remember the group Zoe Girl. Zoe girl. But they sang a song, I think it was called Plain. There's nothing about you that's plain. And so you're a jewel, you're a treasure, you're one of a kind. So that concept has always been just a huge part of my heart. And so in the past few years, watching God use what he put so deeply in my heart for all those years to remind my own self of, that's not something that will ever go away. That is a foundation now that I already had so deep in me. Now it's just like it pours out of who I am. Mm-hmm. I hope that doesn't ever go away. I hope that we don't have to keep talking about pornography. I mean, that would be fine. We can get rid of that. But if that's the catalyst that God wants to use, it gives me empathy for what women feel like. It gives me empathy for a woman who feels like she's not enough. And so, no, I don't think that part will ever go away for me.
Okay, but how much of that you just talked about, that foundational stuff that's been such a big deal for you for so long, how much did all of that mean to you, basically as kind of your own fortification when you very well could have completely fallen apart? And I understand that this was obviously incredibly devastating,
Sure.
but it didn't completely drop you to nothingness. Mm-hmm. That it sounds like what you're saying is that that's the core of you, that perhaps it's quite at credit for your survival through all this.
It was, and that's what I would that would be my message to shout from the rooftops for any woman who finds this out. It has nothing to do with you. And I can't say I never looked at myself in the mirror and thought I can't measure up. I mean, of course I had those thoughts because that's human nature. And I was faced with a reality I didn't see coming. So of course I had those thoughts, but it never broke Erin. Broke Erin's heart. But me, Erin, the girl who God created, she knew who she was. I knew that I am chosen and I am perfectly made the way that God wanted me to be made. And so I may not look like the things he's been seeing, but that's not my fault. This is who I am and this is what he picked. So to any woman who is walking through this, I would love nothing more than to give her a hug and say, this has nothing to do with you. And your husband will tell you that and you won't believe him. But it's actually true. It's not about you. You are made in the way that you're supposed to, and you're beautiful and you're inside and out. You're who God made you to be. And you're more than this story. You are not just this. You're so much more.
Well, then, Mike, similarly to you, I guess I'd like to think that somewhere in the midst of all of this, that it's had to occur to you at some point that this will not be what defines you. This was a season, a very long season. And it's easy to kind of sit and talk about all the things that were so detrimental to you, ultimately detrimental to your marriage. That's not going to label you. That's not who you are. How do you internalize that and know that that is behind you and you are still who you are in Christ?
Good question. Even in the midst of the pornography addiction, I never once was confused about who I was in Christ. And that may not make sense. Because my addiction started in high school and all my friends were doing it. And so it kind of felt normal, right? And I just thought this is going to be a short phase. This is just you're young, you're horny. This is going to pass, right? And it didn't. It stuck and it continued on. And yet I would still go to youth group. I would still go to church and surrounded by Christian friends, Christian bubble. I knew right from wrong.
And yet
I was mired in this addiction all along, knowing that God can forgive me. God can set me free. I'm hearing stories about other people who have drug addiction and alcohol addiction. God's setting them free. And so this can happen for me, right? I still believed I was a Christian. I was baptized. I was speaking in tongues. I mean, doing all the good Christian things, right? But yet I'm still stuck in this addiction. So I don't know if this makes any sense at all, but I never lost sight of God throughout the whole thing. And I believe he had me held tight to him as well. I mean, there were other struggles and things that I would go throughout my young life that brought me to my knees. Hard stuff I was dealing with that I truly sought after God. And I know that he was there in the midst of it. And that's another cool thing about God, what I experienced in that time. You know, I would be active in my addiction. And then an issue would happen that I would have to cry out to God for outside of my addiction. God, I need your help through this. Literally bawling on the floor and feeling his presence. He never left me in that time of my addiction. He was still right there. So I always knew that he was real. I always knew who I was in him. I just couldn't get out of the addiction that I had. So I don't know that the addiction ever defined me as who I was. I never looked at it that way. And this may not make any sense at all, but it's how I felt at the time of just, I know I'm still saved. I know he still loves me. I just need help getting out of this addiction, this problem that I have.
Yeah. There's no perfect way out of this. You guys can talk about what you've been through, but it's not exactly a prescription. Hey, if you're in this and you find yourself throwing your hands up, just do what we did.
Right.
Yeah, that's such a good way to say it, because that's how it felt. I felt
I'm sure
every day felt like we were just stumbling through the next day, because Mike didn't go to our pastor and receive a list of here's the things that you do and here's what Erin does, and in 60 to 90 days we'll be all over this and we'll move on.
Yeah.
We didn't get that. We got met with love, but we just had to stumble through the journey of redemption, basically. And so there was
there's no shortcut.
No, and what worked for us is not going to work for somebody else,
Right.
because it was so, to me, it was the Holy Spirit meeting us where we were. And this is what Mike and Erin needed for their healing. And on day 73, maybe, is when God met me in this way in my heart, because that's what I needed that day. That may not be what another lady needs on day 73. And same for Mike. It's just he loves us so specifically and uniquely. There is no one size fits all for a process like this. You just have to cling to him.
Yeah.
That's what we did. We clung to each other and to him.
At the risk of churching it up, outside of Jesus, there's no magic pill.
No, that's what we tell
this.
people. We are still married today because of Jesus and our marriage counselor, Dave. Shout out to Dave.
Fair enough.
Because he helped us talk through things that we didn't know how to get past.
Well, even within that, again, we can kind of put this in the bracket of saying, let's call it 3 years. Did you both arrive at that moment of, oh, wow, I think we may actually survive this? Was that a part of your discussions, or do you feel like you each just kind of had to arrive there at your own time, at your own pace? And I'm not asking for dates and times, but at some point, did you feel like you could breathe?
No. Still waiting. Just kidding. It was just, I've never experienced anything like it before, because we'd have good days and then we'd have terrible days. So you go 2 steps forward and 5 steps backwards. And so for me, there wasn't ever a day where I was like, I think this is going to work. It was more like each day I would get another extra quarter of a breath. So it was so slow, and it wasn't until like a couple years in, I remember looking back thinking, okay, so maybe I did have that moment. Like, I think we did it. But during it, no. It didn't ever feel like we had arrived. There was no certain point or step that we hit that made it feel like we've done it.
But for me, the moment I came down the stairs and confessed, I felt like the weight was lifted and okay, now we can move on and everything's going to be great. Not realizing that the weight just transferred to you. So I was expecting, yeah, she's going to be upset, right? But she already knows, because the message I just listened to, that I'm going to come down, and if it says, she's going to be prepped and ready for it. So we'll go through a little struggle, and then in a week we'll be fine,
6
right?
weeks.
Yeah. It'll be
So cute. Was that really what you thought?
That's
I
adorable.
did, but then I quickly realized uh-oh.
The wrath of Erin has come out.
Yeah. And what's going to happen? How are you going to not hate me? And I think that a lot of that came from when we were sitting with Dave and I was able to open up because he was digging into my past, into my childhood and bringing up stuff. And you started to realize there's a lot more brokenness to Mike that was created very early on. Mm-hmm. And that allowed her to have compassion and empathy towards me. And I honestly think that was the beginning of the transformation of saving our marriage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you
were
explain
able
it like
to
that,
see me in a different light.
Mm-hmm. My heart sitting at that island, the minute Mike told me, first was compassion for like a second. And then my heart just became really hard towards him. Mm-hmm. And so I walked around like that for a long time. And so we would have these moments of counseling where it wasn't like it softened all at once. It would just like a little chip would come off of that hard heart. And he would tell a story of something he experienced as a kid. And it would just take a little piece off. And I could find a little bit of empathy to stay married for another day. And I think that's what the process was like. It was just slowly between hearing you talk and God working inside my hard heart. It just slowly chipped away to finding that love again towards him.
You just mentioned counseling, and I'm a huge fan, no matter what stage of life, or singles or married couples, whatever that is. Is there a way for you to rate how important counseling was in all of this?
You tell him, because you were so against counseling for so many years.
I was going to say my scale was kind of fluttering back and forth there. So at the beginning, she mentioned we need to go to counseling.
At the beginning of what? Our marriage?
No. At the beginning, when this first happened. And we had talked about counseling prior to that. And my guard always went up right away. I was like, we don't need counseling. He's not going to tell us anything we don't already know. And we'll be fine. We'll figure this out, right? We've got God. We've got friends. We have each other. We can do this, right? So so I would rate it at like a 0, maybe a 1 on a scale to 10. And when this issue happened, of course, it got brought up again. And now I'm realizing if I don't go to counseling at this moment, this will be the end of us. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
So I did it honestly begrudgingly because I still thought this is going to be a waste of time and money, right? We go, and the more sessions that we completed, the more I realized there's something to this. And he's digging in, he's figuring out what's going on. And so today, I would not rate it at a 0 or a 1. I would give it a solid 10 because I truly think that was one of the biggest things that helped keep our marriage going.
Yeah, agreed.
That's
you're
just gonna give it that? That's
10.
It's not the Erin I know.
Are you thinking like an 8.5?
No, I'm thinking I'm gonna cry if I say out loud what I'm thinking as you say that. Like, you saying that is a true testament of what God has done. Like, he changed you. In 3 years, you were not the person that you were before all of this came out. So in that freedom that God gave you, you are able to say, I was wrong before and I really needed help. Your heart has changed in 3 years to things that it's not just because you want to appease me. It wouldn't have lasted that long. God did a work inside of you.
And that's what I tell people today. I mean, we have recommended this counselor that we went to multiple other couples since we've gone.
He should pay us. We should get a fee.
A little spiff, kickback.
That's how much I believe in it. I still have this guy's phone number. I'm texting it to some of my friends saying, you need to go see this guy, when they talk about issues that they're having. Because of the radical change that it had with us, now I'm a firm believer and I'm recommending it to other people. Yeah. Never thought that day would come. Ever.
Sure. When you become the spokesboy for
right.
I was totally against it. And now I'm just willingly giving his number out to people.
That's so good.
For me, I think for where we go from here, I've thought about this a lot. Like, what's in the future for Mike and Erin? And yesterday we were in the car coming home from church and Kaden randomly says, our 8-year-old, you guys ever going to get divorced? just out of the blue
Yeah.
I don't even know what we were talking about.
Wow.
And so kind of just paused for a second, and we didn't say anything for a second because it was just,
We weren't talking about anything like that at all.
And we weren't arguing. I mean, everything was just normal. And that moment, we both said, no, Daddy and I are working really hard to not ever do that. And that's why Mom and Daddy go on date nights. And that's why it's important that you let us finish conversations and you don't interrupt. That's an important lesson we're learning. Here's tangible things that you as a child can understand. This is what we're working towards. Yep. And it kind of made me pause and realize, thinking about it, that Mike and I can't say what's going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years. But what we know today is, and I think you'd agree with me, marriage is really precious. And we've learned that you can break it so easily. And it has to be really taken care of. And so if our goal today is to not get divorced, and I mean, so much more behind it than that. It's not just that, but it's one day at a time. And it takes off some pressure. It makes me less scared to think, you mean you could relapse again in 5 days? It's, what are we doing today to take care of this marriage and what God's given us? And how can I support him better? And it helps me not feel so overwhelmed by what could happen.
Yep.
And instead, all I can do is trust today. And we just do the best we can today.
Because you just mentioned Caden, I thought of something. But you've got 2 short people that live in this house with you that you're modeling marriage for. With that in mind, what emphasis does that change your emphasis at all in modeling that marriage, that you guys have survived some brutality here? This isn't just, we got in an argument about the bills and something much bigger happened, but they're still watching.
I've been really cognizant of, obviously we still get annoyed with each other. We still argue.
What?
I know. So annoying.
It's annoying being annoyed.
Yeah, it is. The whole thing is just annoying. But being really careful of how we respond, because I am more aware of how aware they are. And Caden especially, he's very sensitive to how we talk to each other. And his little brain is processing through all sorts of stuff. And he's just, I guess he's seeing friends whose parents are divorced. And then he goes home and then his parents have a fight. Well, that probably is scary. Yeah. So recently we did argue in front of them. And so he was asking questions like, please don't fight. And I said, Caden, watch what's going to happen. Daddy and I are talking because we disagree, but we are not going to leave this room until we figure it out. So by the end of this conversation, Daddy and I will be on the same page. And that is a healthy conversation. So we figured it out. We had a conversation and then we circled back to Caden and said, Daddy and I, we figured it out. We worked through it. Yeah. And that's just part of being married, but you have to be able to have those conversations. So I'm not good at holding in if I feel frustrated at Mike. I'm working on how I share that frustration, but I can't wait till the kids go to bed.
And then you're going to let them have it.
Yeah, we'll let them have it, let it rip. But I want them to see what a healthy confrontation, healthy dialogue looks like.
Sure.
Healthy disagreement. That is one thing we can provide to them that we've learned in this process is healthy communication.
Yeah. Mike, I want to ask you something specific because of a video that Erin posted yesterday with you teaching your daughter how to ride a bike. Something that countless dads throughout history have done. Does something like that hit different for you in light of what you have survived?
The fact that I can still be there, a part of it.
That you're teaching your daughter how to ride her bike. Your wife is standing just a few feet away, gloriously recording the whole thing. Yeah. Because you guys are just you guys.
Yeah. Things seem to be much sweeter now than they were prior to this addiction coming out. Those moments like that, the moments that Erin and I have sometimes seem to be much more real, much more authentic, and just truly sweeter. I don't know. I don't want to sound too corny or, too hallmarky, but it just...
Do it. Say it. I want to hear it.
Just...
Love it.
And you even, I think you made the comment today about, hey, what's going on? Like you seem more like sentimental, more inward focused.
I did say that to you.
Something like that. Yeah. With
nostalgic.
That's the word. See, she's better with words than I. It feels like all of a sudden, the best way I can describe it is that I don't have much time left here on this earth, and I need to make happen the good things now because my time is so short. In a weird way. I mean, we all know that life is short and blah, 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 all those things that you're told, but it truly feels like right now, like these kids are growing so fast. I don't have much time left. Mm-hmm. And we've done silly things lately. Like our kids never sleep with us. But yet our son begged us the other night, hey, can I please sleep with you? And I was all for it, right? I was a sucker. And Erin...
It was a terrible decision.
Erin's like, no, he can't do it because there's not going to be enough room and I'm not going to sleep good. And he ends up sleeping there, true. Right? Because she started to feel bad. I kind of guilted her into it a little bit.
Nice.
So he does that. And then you got this moment with Peyton and it's just like, they're only going to be little so long, and I don't know. We need to... a long way to say, I feel like that I've just got to pour into them. Not that I wasn't before, but it just feels more so that way now. And even into our marriage.
Yeah. After Mike shared, there was a wall that has been lifted. And so Mike was always a bit guarded. So to get to see him in our family as a fully part of the family now is very special.
Do you ever just stop in the craziness of life and two small kids that may be bouncing off the walls?
That's
and the dog.
That's the dog bouncing.
And the dog,
sure.
And the dog is barking, and it just seems like all you can do is just kind of sit back and go, okay, this is just our wonderful mess. Mm-hmm. And I'll take this over $1 million any day.
No. I would take $100,000 of some of these days.
I'll do it for $20.
There is no possible way to properly thank Mike and Erin for their openness, honesty, and willingness to talk about something that most people would never dare even speak of. I believe with all that is within me that there are people listening to this right now who are stirred. Dealing with the hard truths in our lives can be one of the most difficult things that any of us can ever encounter. But that is the exact place where the grace of God can become the most valuable thing to us. 2 Corinthians 12:10 says, "For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." If you or someone you know is dealing with anything like this, any unhealthy sexual behavior, I have some valuable links in the show notes where you can get started on a path to healing. More than anything, lean into Jesus, maybe more than you ever have before, and then get a support system, even if that's just one trusted friend or counselor. Our lives and our marriages and families are so much better when they are unencumbered by any kind of addiction. The work will be hard, seemingly impossible at times, but we serve a God who specializes in the impossible. Thank you, Mike and Erin. I love you both. Thank you, Nick Stumbo, for adding such a valuable voice to this series. Thank you, Ross King, for allowing me to use Walk in the Valley as the theme song for this series. The lyrics are just too perfect for a topic such as this. And thank you, dear listener. Your ongoing support of this show means the world to me. And I will catch you here next time in the Nook.
The Nook podcast is a production of Sozo Digital Media.